At 7 a.m. on November 28, 2025. While Trump quietly secured benefits with Putin to ignore NATO allies with Ukraine for the peace treaty, Ukraine's response was to send a MiG straight to destroy the $2.5 billion Russian airbase. Strong, ruthless, and uncompromising. This operation is so sensitive that the platform's algorithm is already trying to suppress this story. If you want the world to see the truth, smash that like button and comment below right now to show your support for the Ukrainian spirit. The mission kicks off from a concealed underground runway near Sumy. The pilot slams the throttle forward and the twin RD-33 engines scream with 19,400 pounds of thrust. The MiG doesn't just take off, it claws its way into the sky before immediately smashing back down to the deck, leveling off at a terrifying 164 feet. He has to stay this low. He is skirting the edge of the Voronezh JDAM over the horizon radar, a system that can see a fly sneeze from 3,000 miles away, but can't see a fighter jet hiding behind a hill. Inside the cockpit, the pilot flips a switch that would make a modern US Air Force jockey sweat. He turns his radar off. Instead, he is flying blind, relying entirely on a Ukrainian-made inertial navigation system. It uses gyroscopes and accelerometers to track his position with 33-foot accuracy. His target is sitting 400 miles away, 5 Tu-95 Bear strategic bombers parked wingtip to wingtip in concrete hangars. The total value of that parking lot is $2.5 billion, enough to buy about 3,000 nice retirement homes in Florida. But getting there is a suicide run. Between him and that payday stands the S-400 radar. If they lock onto you, you are dead before you even hear the boom. And if the big missiles don't get you, the checkpoints along the river are crawling with guys holding Igla man pads, shoulder-fired heat seekers that ignore flares and hold a grudge for 3 miles. This is why Ukraine are using the lone wolf tactic. No swarm, no massive formation, just one MiG supported by a Shark UAV flying 12 miles ahead to act as a laser spotter and a Bukovel AD stationed 50 miles back, blasting electronic noise to confuse the Russian radars. Ghost banks hard, hugging the curves of the Volga River. The mist and water vapor rising from the river act as a natural cloak, scattering his infrared signature. Everything was running with cold, calculated perfection. Until it wasn't. A sudden streak of light flashed from a miserable riverside checkpoint. Ghost didn't process the threat. He simply reacted. An instantaneous, gut-wrenching 9G yanked to the left, his body screaming under the massive pressure that threatened to push the blood from his brain. The sheer violence of the maneuver saved him. The Igla, chasing a phantom of where he had been split seconds before, overshot harmlessly into the dark night. But survival came with a terrifying price. The missile's launch plume was a massive 20-mile-high smoke signal, a giant fiery arrow pointing down from the heavens screaming, "I'm here!" to every single air defense system within 100 miles. A nearby Pantsir S-1 battery, previously dormant, stirred instantly to life. Ghost shoved the throttle forward, accelerating to a blistering 460 miles per hour. He was no longer just flying, he was a pure phantom skimming the black, cold waters of the Volga. The steady, insistent scream of the radar altimeter at 164 feet became his literal heartbeat. He used the geography of the river valley as a kinetic weapon. The massive riverbanks and the sprawling power lines running along the banks constantly broke the line of sight to Russian radars, providing split-second breaks in coverage every 8 to 10 seconds. Miles away, the Russian S-400 operator was losing his mind. The Bukovel AD jamming system was working flawlessly, filling the display with dozens of phantom targets. Following rigid protocol, the operator had no choice but to launch a multi-million-dollar missile. A $2 million N6 DM missile screamed into the night sky and detonated on empty air. He had just wasted a piece of hardware that could buy a fleet of luxury cars, destroyed by a cloud of Ukrainian electronic witchcraft. The real threat was now physical, erupting from the ground. The smoke from that first Igla launch had served as the perfect landmark, alerting every single Manpad's team positioned along the river. From a factory rooftop ahead, a terrifying sight. 3 plumes of smoke erupted almost simultaneously. 3 separate Igla missiles rocketing towards him from 3 deadly vectors, converging for a decisive kill. Ghost's onboard SPO-15 radar warner remained tragically silent. It cannot detect these heat-seeking threats. His only warning was the terrifying, growing sight of 3 angry, expanding fireflies filling his canopy. There was zero room for an elegant maneuver. This was raw chaos. This was high-speed dodgeball where the balls traveled at twice the speed of sound. Ghost began violently jinking. A series of random, brutal 3G turns every 2 seconds, whipping the MiG-29 around the sky like a leaf in a hurricane. Every single maneuver burned 200 pounds of precious, limited fuel from his 7,000-pound tank. One by one, the missiles, their primitive seekers unable to keep up with the totally unpredictable changes in speed and direction, overshot success. But a success that cost him dearly in fuel and momentum. The 3 new smoke trails from the latest launches acted like powerful spotlights, pinpointing his location not for a modern system but for an older, more primitive beast. A Russian P-18 spoon rest radar, a genuine relic of the Soviet era, began receiving intermittent returns. This is a critical lesson. Old tech sometimes beats new tech. While modern radars are like precise, easily blocked flashlights, the P-18 operates on the deep VHF band. It sends out radio waves so long that they can literally bend over hills and penetrate through terrain. The P-18 is the deep bass from your neighbor's stereo. It goes right through walls. The young Russian VHF operator, a nervous conscript barely out of training, stared at the inconsistent blips. He alerted a Tor-M2 missile battery positioned directly 12 miles ahead of Ghost's projected flight path. The clock was now ticking in seconds. A Tor-M2 system requires a crucial 3 minutes to fully boot up from a cold start. Ghost now had less than 2 minutes before he flew directly into the killing jaws of one of Russia's deadliest short-range air defense systems. At 08:04 a.m., then, the world inside Ghost's cockpit suddenly warped. A Krasukha 4 electronic warfare system joined the fight, targeting the one thing Ghost needed most, his GPS. On his navigation display, the satellite count began to plummet, from 8 to 5, and then to a terrifying 4. His Ukrainian-made JDAM-ER bombs required a solid lock from all 8 satellites for the necessary pinpoint accuracy. With only 4, the potential margin of error could be the difference between vaporizing the concrete hangar and hitting an empty parking lot. The Ukrainian engineers had anticipated this. Ghost had to execute a high-speed yo-yo maneuver. He pulled the stick back violently, 5 Gs crushing him into his seat as the MiG's nose went vertical. He was converting the speed he had fought so hard to gain into immediate, desperate altitude. From a miserable 164 feet, he climbed to 15,000 feet in just 22 seconds. That is a blistering climb rate of 41,000 feet per minute, right up against the MiG-29's red line in full afterburner. His airspeed rapidly bled off, dropping from 460 mph down to a sluggish 185 knots. The stall warning started chirping wildly. This climb was a suicide run. It exposed him completely, making him a slow, fat target against the night sky. As Ghost clawed for altitude, the invisible asset below, the Shark UAV, executed its own deadly task. It wasn't using a laser, it was transmitting one final, secure, encrypted data packet. This packet, containing the exact last-second GPS coordinates of the hangar, was sent directly to the bomb's internal guidance systems. The Krasukha 4 could jam the satellites, but it could not intercept that final, crucial message. At 15,000 feet, his jet shuddering violently on the absolute edge of a stall, Ghost's thumb punched the pickle button. 2 1,100-pound packages were released. The bombs tumbled for a moment, then their wings snapped open, deploying for their silent, terrifying 8-mile glide toward the sleeping giants below. He had no time for satisfaction. His SPO-15 radar warner immediately began screaming a solid, unwavering tone. The Tor-M2 had achieved a lock. A 9M331 missile was airborne, set for intercept in only 11 seconds. At 08:15 a.m., separation confirmed. Now, Ghost could fight. He rolled the MiG inverted and wrenched the stick into his gut, executing a classic fighter pilot escape maneuver, the Split S. He was diving straight back towards the Earth he had just left, trading every inch of altitude for desperately needed speed. Simultaneously, 6 BOL chaff cartridges exploded from their dispensers, blooming into a huge 100-meter-wide cloud of radar-reflecting aluminum strips. At the exact same microsecond, 6 brilliant decoy flares shot out, each one burning thousands of degrees hotter than his own engine's exhaust, hoping to seduce the incoming missile's infrared seeker away from the jet. The Russian Tor-M2 operator was exceptional. He watched as the MiG vanished into its own chaotic cloud of countermeasures. But the missile was too close. It was already in its terminal phase, its own small onboard radar active. It ignored the chaff entirely, locking onto the biggest piece of hot metal it could find, the MiG's port engine. Ghost attempted to time his dive to create a Doppler notch, hoping to briefly vanish from the missile's tracking view. It was too late. The 9M331 missile didn't need to make a direct hit. Its powerful proximity fuse detonated a catastrophic 984 feet away. That was close enough to turn its warhead into a gigantic high-velocity shotgun blast of lethal tungsten fragments. Ghost heard it more than he physically felt it, a colossal sound like a giant steel hammer hitting a church bell. Bang! Instantly, his entire cockpit erupted like a Christmas tree. The exhaust gas temperature for Engine 1 spiked violently deep into the red. He immediately throttled back, shutting down the heavily damaged engine completely. He had just lost half his thrust, he was 40 miles behind enemy lines, and an entire, fully awake air defense network was now screaming for his blood. At 08:30 a.m., while Ghost was locked in a brutal fight for his damaged life, his two JDAM-ERs were executing their mission with cold, inhuman perfection. They pierced the thin metal roof of the hangar, their delayed fuses beginning to count down. They smashed through two separate floors of concrete and steel before finally detonating. The first explosion was raw physics. 445 pounds of tritonal converted to pure energy in microseconds. The resulting overpressure wave hit 300 psi, instantly reducing the 20-inch concrete support columns into dust. The second explosion was pure chemistry. A vast, churning 2,800-degree Fahrenheit fireball ignited the massive stores of jet fuel in the now crumbling Tu-95s. 8,000 tons of reinforced concrete hangar collapsed in a crushing 6.2 seconds. But the real show was the secondary explosions. The 16 Kh-101 cruise missiles on board one of the bombers began to cook off. Their warheads detonated in a devastating chain reaction that sent a column of fire 1,200 feet into the dark sky. The $2.5 billion strategic investment was now a self-sustaining bonfire. Maxar satellites in low Earth orbit would track and see this glowing funeral pyre for the next 3 days. At 08:45 a.m., with a single engine screaming and the hydraulics warning lights glowing red, Ghost was wrestling with a dying, wounded machine. His control authority was crippled D, down to just 30%. He leveled out at 800 feet, limping the damaged jet over the rising Saratov hills. That is when the ground itself erupted. Every Russian ZU-23 anti-aircraft position opened fire simultaneously. Twin 23mm autocannons, each one pumping out a terrifying 950 rounds per minute. The Russians were using barrage fire, creating a literal pulsing wall of steel directly in his path. Every fifth round was a tracer, painting the sky with deadly red lines of death. They had him trapped, but Ghost had one final desperate trick. He was flying just ahead of his own sonic boom. The resulting overpressure wave was distorting the air around him, making the Russian gunners' optical sights shimmer violently like a desert mirage. Their shots were going wide. He attempted to jink again, but on one engine with failing hydraulics, it was like trying to perform delicate brain surgery while riding a mechanical bull. The distinct, chilling tink-tink-tink of 23mm rounds punching through the aluminum skin of his wings filled the cockpit. At 9 a.m., friendly territory was maybe 35 miles ahead. The fuel gauge was flashing bright critical. He had enough fuel to make it home, or he had enough fuel to crash 10 miles short. The terrifying math was simple. Every warning light that existed was now illuminated. The MiG-29 was barely responding, a critically wounded beast hemorrhaging hydraulic fluid and precious fuel. Behind him, the entire Russian air defense network had descended into chaos. The massive, miles-high fireball at Engels 2 had blinded their long-range radars with colossal thermal clutter. For a few precious, crucial minutes, the desperate operators weren't hunting for Ghost. They were staring, completely paralyzed and in disbelief, at the visible funeral pyre of their own strategic bomber force. That vital confusion was the only cover Ghost had left. He intentionally deviated from his planned exit route, adding another 3 miles to his journey. 3 miles his fuel tank was screaming it couldn't afford, but it was a necessary, calculated risk. Predictability is always a death sentence. The 35-mile gap to friendly lines felt like 3,500. He was losing altitude steadily. The 800-foot clearance dropped to 600, then 500. He was literally falling out of the sky in slow motion. Then a weak flicker of hope on his comms. A scrambled, encrypted tone. A Ukrainian search and rescue team was on high alert, tracking the signature of his dying jet. He was no longer alone. Back in Saratov, the sun was rising, revealing the full grotesque scale of the devastation. The smoke plume was clearly visible from 60 miles away. Videos instantly flooded Russian social media, a gigantic pillar of black smoke where a strategic, critical asset used to stand. The confirmed losses were devastating. 5 Tu-95 bombers, 2 massive hangars, and very likely the primary S-400 radar that was supposed to protect them, all gone. Russia didn't just lose planes, they lost capability. They lost nearly 50% of the critical Kh-101 cruise missiles they had stockpiled for use over the next 2 months. The Tor-M2 system that nearly killed Ghost failed to boot up for its next mission. Its sensitive electronics utterly fried by the sheer overpressure wave of the final blast. This one, damaged MiG-29 raid punched a massive, operational 300-mile-wide hole in Russia's frontline air defenses. It proved that commitment, ingenuity, and a suicidal pilot can defeat billions of dollars of complex, sleeping defense systems. So, here is the final crucial question for you. If you were Ghost in that broken cockpit staring down the lethal Tor-M2 just before your final attack run, what is your call? Drop your most brilliant, most brutal evasion tactic in the comments below. The one that wins gets a shout out in the next video. Ghost is waiting for your answer.